Hello and welcome to the Islamic Finance Weekly, where we bring you updates in the non-interest financial market space. It is widely believed that the need to accelerate and sustain economic growth is primarily built on the national system of innovation. Developing countries are diverting from the old paradigms and shifting towards new economic models of strategic development through the use of information and knowledge in order to generate opportunities for businesses and they'll gain competitive advantage in the global market. Nigeria, as the largest market for Islamic finance in Africa, now has 3 non-interest banks, 4 takaful companies, 3 Islamic ethical funds, 2 non-interest microfinance banks, over 100 Islamic cooperative societies, and has issued 4 sovereign sukuk, that is the 3 FGN sukuk bonds and the Osun State sukuk, sovereign sukuk that was issued in 2013. So the question here today is, does Nigeria have any Islamic venture capital firm? And is there any strategy to woo them into the market? On today's program, we discuss prospects for the growth of Islamic venture capital in Nigeria. To lead this conversation with me is Mr. Habeeb Gbenle, a fund accountant and Sharia-Compliance officer at Capital Trust. Mr. Habeeb joins us from Lagos. Good afternoon. It is nice to have you on the show to discuss this relevant topic.
Good afternoon, Bukola. Thank you for having me to share my knowledge on venture capital in Nigeria.
Pleasure is mine. So give us an overview of Islamic venture capital and the opportunities for growth in the nation.
Okay. Firstly, I would like to define what venture capital is before we even move into its Islamic equivalent.
Yeah.
So, venture capital basically is a form of private equity and a type of financing to startup companies or small businesses. And it is believed that, or the usual practice is that this financing goes to businesses that have high growth potential. That is, they can scale and provide the required or needed returns that investors so desire. Coming from that, what is the Islamic venture capital all about? Islamic venture capital is also the same based on the nomenclature, but the only difference, or the difference, is that it has to provide financing into businesses that are Sharia-compliant, and the form and mode of financing also has to be in line with the Sharia. And if you look at it holistically, both the conventional and Islamic venture capital are always directed to early stage businesses or growth companies.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Young entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Young entrepreneurs, exactly. So trying to now explain further about the Islamic Venture Capital Fund. Like every other fund, the truth is you have the investors and you have the fund manager, or we call them GP or general partners. The investors are always known as limited partners or LPs. But from the Islamic equivalent, the conventional, to start off, has this kind of arrangement where the LPs invest in the fund that will be managed by the fund manager, or we call them GP. And in the Islamic equivalent too, the same thing also holds. And the most popular tool used is the Wakala structure, where the LPs appoint the fund manager to manage the investment on its behalf for a return of a management fee or thereabouts. But in terms of the relationship between the venture capital fund or the venture capital and the startup businesses or startup companies, the most popular tool is the Mudoroba tool, where the venture capital company provides the funding, of course known as the Rubble Mall, and the startup company that is getting these investments serve as the Modori, that is, will take care of the expertise and the management of the company. So basically, that is what the Islamic venture capital looks like. And most people have said, oh, the Islamic venture capital conforms more to the Islamic principles of financing, which is the Mudoroba and the Musharaka. But of course, from the Sharia point of view, that is also an alternative, a vehicle through which businesses can be financed. Of course, it's not the solely and only means of getting business funded.
Thank you very much, Mr. Habeeb. From your point of view, the aim of venture capital is to provide funding for young startups. And instance, we have young Muslim entrepreneurs, but they don't have access to capital. I think at this junction, the non-interest finance institutions in Nigeria and governments need to work together to establish an Islamic venture capital. And I believe it will go a long way. Thank you very much for those insights. Now, the youthful population in the continent are leveraging tech with their digital skills to lead in the area of innovation, and Nigeria is not an exception. So tell us, why are there no Islamic venture capital firms in Africa that can support Sharia-compliant startups?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Firstly, I would want to say that over time, or let's take a 5-year period or 6-year period as we have it, if you are to compare the percentage of funding into tech startups, let me limit it to tech startups because they are the one of recent getting all the dollars these days. So if you look at 5 years, 6 years from now, or 5 years, 6 years in total, majority of the funding to these startups have been coming from foreign investors. And from statistics, maybe we just have about 1% that are from local investors. That speaks volume of the reason why we don't even have an Islamic VC. Even before we go to the Islamic VC side of things, let's even face the conventional VC that's even growing in leaps and bounds. The truth is, even the local VCs that we have in Nigeria, most of them the funds are not even domiciled in Nigeria because their LPs, note, their investors are actually foreigners, and they are always compelled that, you need to set up this fund in maybe tax havens jurisdiction like the Cayman Islands, Delaware in the US, or in Europe, because these are where these investors reside in, and they are more comfortable with the tax regime and the fiscal policies around this place. So the local VCs that we have at times are always compelled to domicile their funds in this place. So the truth is, we have a lot of foreign VC firms that are Africa focused in terms of their investments, and we have locals too in Nigeria, but to some extent their funds are not domiciled in Nigeria, mainly because of what I've just said, because most of their investments are coming from the foreigners, and the foreigners are always giving that preferential treatment of allowing them the fund to be domiciled in this jurisdiction that I've mentioned. That said, one way to actually solve or grow the venture capital industry in Nigeria and the Islamic equivalent, that is the focus of this talk, is that we need more support from the government. For example, the NSIA, the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, is one agency, federal government agency, that I think can play a very vital role in this space. Yes, we are beginning to have local VCs that are also co-investing with their foreign counterparts. Before now, we usually do not, but now we are beginning to see. But what has still remained constant is that a larger chunk still comes from the foreign investors. We want a situation whereby local VCs too will be leading investment rounds into startups in Nigeria. So with partnership or with help coming from or intervention from the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, maybe partnering with local VC companies, I think that would really, really help, because you would remember that the economic landscape in Nigeria, the figures or the statistics is not totally encouraging, as it were. And this is the time the government needs to take more action, trying to strategically position itself to investing in these growth companies. And that will, to a very large extent, help with job creation and get the wide pool of talent that we have in Nigeria utilized. Then another area that I think collaboration can come from is from the Islamic Development Bank, that is the private arm, which is the ICD.
That's a multilateral institution.
World Bank. Yes, compared with what we have in the World Bank, the IFC has actually been playing an active role in investing in startups. There are a host of startups that the IFC has invested in directly, not even through funds. So it will be interesting to see the ICD of the Islamic Development Bank to also come into the fray and participate in this venture capital investing or startup investing, as it were. I think when we begin to have this will gradually begin to pave the way for local Islamic VCs. But what is the low-hanging fruit here? We can all complain about not having Islamic VC, but there's something we can actually do to tackle this. And what is that thing? Is for high net worth individuals to come together, or we call them business angels. They can come together to form a syndicate. And when they come together to form this syndicate, they can begin to now invest or identify high growth startups that are Sharia-compliant, or should I say halal startups, you get, and they can start investing in this startup. And with time, this can morph into a full-fledged Islamic VC. And this particular practice is now happening in the UK through Islamic Finance Guru. They have a VC arm, and this is coming from having a syndicate. And really, this is how even the conventional VC in Nigeria also started, through the Lagos Angel Network, by some high net worth individuals coming together to start investing in startups. And over time, we started having influx of local VCs coming up. So the same too can happen from the Islamic point of view before we even start having a full-fledged Islamic VC fund. So it's important for HNIs to come together and invest in startups. Of course, the success stories from Flutterwave and Paystack has actually ignited some form of interest from local investors, because local investors, or Nigerian investors as we have it, are more accustomed to investing in real estate, bonds, and thereabouts, but do not necessarily fancy startup investing, which is now seen as becoming more profitable and attractive for investors. So I think that is really the way to go. Thank you.
You made a valid point, Mr. Habeeb. As you've said, that the high net worth individuals, the government agencies, non-interest finance institutions in Nigeria, and the multilateral institutions like ICD, as you've said, yes, they really need to come together and work. And I would say, even to build a strong and competitive IVC model, they still need to meet with some basic requirements like international investment standard and Sharia rulings. Now, let's look at the business environment. What are the enablers for creating a thriving Islamic venture capital industry in the country?
Thank you very much for that question. Unfortunately, any problem we have in terms of the Islamic venture capital, which we don't even have any now, also speaks to the conventional, which we have a number of them already in play. I think the first is from a policy point of view, and this speaks to the SEC. Perhaps the SEC needs to engage the ecosystem, that is, those that are playing in the VC space, and perhaps collaborate, hold a stakeholders meeting to see how they can help them to tackle what I've said earlier about investors not being comfortable with maybe investing in funds that are domiciled in Nigeria. It's really an issue, and if we keep having that, we would have little to no VC fund domiciled in Nigeria, and that could affect chances of even local investors, high net worth individuals, partaking in this kind of investment. Yes, I said the narrative is beginning to change. We are having a host of local investors, HNI, begin to participate. And as we begin to have this, it's important that the regulatory body that regulates the venture and private equity space comes into fray, dialogue with the key stakeholders to see how, from a policy point of view, the environment is conducive for both the local investors and the foreign investors. So we do not necessarily need to keep going to these investment havens or tax havens jurisdiction to domicile our funds and lose a chunk of FDIs that could serve as a very good form of forex for the country. That is one. Secondly is, of course, I've said this is to start creating some form of awareness through education and through action by the HNIs, forming groups and investing. And when these become more widespread and known, I think we'll begin to have more participation from individuals, from the Islamic VC point of view. Then another area that I think would help, which has, of course, has helped from the conventional point of view, is to have innovation labs, innovation hubs that are focused on the halal industry. Once we have these innovation labs, I believe it serves as a platform through which entrepreneurs, individuals that have one or two ideas that speaks to this industry would come up and they share ideas, and these ideas are developed. So once we begin to have ideas coming out from this particular industry, then we'll begin in no time begin to see VCs or investors coming to invest in them. Note that investors will not just come and start looking for startups that are Sharia-compliant. It is these startups that will make themselves known, and perhaps interest to start coming from both even the conventional VCs, because in other jurisdictions, like in Malaysia, in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE, most conventional VCs they've invested in even Sharia-compliant VC. But the question if the instrument that is used in investing in this startup, is it Sharia-compliant or not, is actually a topic for another day. But what we've seen is conventional VCs has also picked interest in Islamic startups too, provided they have this high growth potential and ability to scale and meet their desired investment objective. So it's important that all these things are in place to ensure we have a thriving Islamic VC industry in Nigeria.
I believe that Nigeria has an enabling environment for Islamic venture capital to thrive. So from your explanation so far, you said one of the major causes of the slow growth of Islamic venture capital firms is due to the lack of awareness among the investors and the absence of viable investment opportunities for small businesses. So let me ask you, how can non-interest financial institutions develop investment models to attract this investment?
Thank you again. Very, very good question, I must say. Unfortunately, the non-interest financial institutions, specifically the banks, are not necessarily a suitable vehicle to invest in this kind of companies, startup companies, using the venture capital too, because the way the banks are modeled, they are modeled not to take a very high risk that we have in the venture capital space. But the banks can participate in one way or the other. How? First thing the bank can do is, like I said earlier, maybe partner with private companies to set up an innovation lab. You could have banks, Islamic non-interest banks could have a fintech lab, for example, that would help churn out fantastic fintech entrepreneurs, Islamic fintech entrepreneurs, that could even serve as a funnel for their own technology side of things, and can also develop themselves to provide products to the masses. We are already having this in the conventional side of things. We are having this in other jurisdictions, and it's high time the non-interest banking institutions in Nigeria delve into this space, create this innovation lab or partnership, or partner with private companies to set up this innovation lab, so as to begin to kind of have the needed innovative solution that the industry requires. That is one way. And I'm not too sure if the non-interest bank can invest directly in these companies. I'm not too sure about that. But what I'm most certain about is based on the regulation from the CBN guidelines, I think they cannot invest directly in this particular investment, but they have a whole lot to play to ensure that there is a thriving ecosystem, and to a very large extent, they kind of get a lot of upsides from it because the conventional counterpart have been doing it. I'm aware that a lot of conventional banks have partnered with private companies to host incubation and accelerator programs. So conventional banks have financed incubation hubs or innovation labs where tech entrepreneurs come together to share ideas. So these are ways in which the non-interest bank can participate and invest in the ecosystem for it to grow and thrive, to actually achieve what we need in the industry.
You are correct, Mr. Habeeb. Innovation is one of the main driving factors for economic growth and continuous healthy economic. So in terms of investment and economic development, what are the sectors that Islamic venture capital firms can support in Nigeria?
Okay, thank you very much for this. So if you look at the VC landscape, let's say 100 years to now, maybe 100 years ago, most of the companies, the VC venture capital investing are the manufacturing companies like Ford, General Motors, and the likes. But today, the narrative is changing. VCs are only looking out for tech startups that can scale fast. And really, this is what is obtainable in other parts of the world, in Malaysia, in Saudi Arabia, in UAE, mention them even in the United Kingdom here. So a lot of focus is on technology companies that can scale and have a multiplier effect in terms of the impact they create. And of course, the result we've been seeing actually attests to this. So when we look at the industry Islamic VC can play in, I'm going to break it down into 4 or 5 industries. The first is the finance industry. The second will be the lifestyle. I'm going to break it down further. The third is education. And the fourth will be agriculture or food. Now, when we look at the finance industry, we are talking about Islamic banking, we are talking about fintechs, we are talking about Takatech or Insurtech as we have it, that is Takafutech or whatever. We are looking at mortgage. Mortgage is an area where we have huge gap in Nigeria.
We have low income earners.
Exactly. Mortgage is one area that we have low investment penetration and low product as far as even the Muslims are concerned. Because as far as mortgage is concerned, we do not necessarily have an Islamic mortgage bank, as it were. And it's been difficult for Muslims to take up the conventional mortgage because of its interest bearing. So it would be interesting to see how startups can be helped or how this space can be innovated around Islamic mortgages for Muslims and even non-Muslims to partake in, provided they see as a very, very table to own homes. And a whole lot is there in the finance space. We talk about Islamic wealth management and other areas. That said about the finance. If you look at the lifestyle, as Muslims, you would agree that there are some things that we can't do. For example, Muslims are prohibited from eating pork. Muslims are prohibited from taking alcohol. So there is a whole lot that has to do with the lifestyle of Muslims. So now, how can the lifestyle sector, as it were, serve as a veritable tool for Islamic VC? Is number one, we have, for example, we have the fashion, the media. For example, Muslims do not want their kids to watch just anyhow cartoon, but maybe cartoon or animated videos that will teach them more about the religion. And for example, there's currently a startup called Muslim Kids that is going global today. And it's going global because of, not just because of it's Muslim kids or something, but because of the demand. We have about 1 billion Muslims all over in the world. So the lifestyle of a Muslim also key into the opportunity for VCs to invest in, and a lot of opportunity for innovators and entrepreneurs to innovate around that area. For example, another area is, I don't know if I mentioned Ibadah earlier. Another area is Ibadah. Look at Muslim Pro. I can tell you, if you meet 10 Muslims, perhaps 70% or 7 of them will tell you that they have Muslim Pro installed in their mobile phone. Muslim Pro is the biggest lifestyle app that we have in the world today.
I have one on my phone. V
Exactly.
Muslim. I have one on my phone.
Exactly. And the truth is, for Muslim Pro, for example, you can actually subscribe to get more features. The truth is, a whole lot of Muslims subscribe. So these are important areas that Muslims can innovate. We have the Quran app on your phone. Yes. You get, if you want more features. So there is a lot for Muslim entrepreneurs, let me put it that way, to innovate around. Then moving to the food industry, where we have halal food. Unfortunately, halal food too is still very at the infantry stage in Nigeria. We have halal certification agency, about 2 of them thereabouts. But unlike the UK, that is a non-Muslim country, you get, or perhaps we have less Muslim in terms of their population. You cannot compare the halal industry or the compliance to halal food in the UK compared to Nigeria. In fact, I have a friend that usually says, if you go out to eat in the UK, you find it very difficult if they don't ask you, you want the halal equivalent or something. But in Nigeria, we do not necessarily have that. And that is another way, that is another opportunity that I think entrepreneurs, innovators can innovate around, that would seek and get the attraction and attention of Islamic VC or investors to invest in, because the market is there. The market is there already for anyone that wants to innovate around to innovate. So in all, these are actually the sectors that I think that Islamic VCs can invest in. To reiterate, the agri sector, which is the food industry, the halal food industry, the finance space, where we have fintechs, education. Yes, I mentioned education. Education too is also very, very important.
Those sectors you highlighted, they are very critical for Nigeria's industry. They are very critical.
Exactly.
Thank you very much for coming on the program, Mr. Habeeb Gbenle. Mr. Habeeb Gbenle is the Fund Accountant and Sharia-Compliance Officer, Capital Trust. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you very much.
The Islamic venture capital industry can achieve many of the desired objectives of Islamic finance if it works on the principles of equity and fairness. One way to achieve them is through collaboration with government and non-interest finance institutions. Non-interest finance institutions can also use charity funds to invest in IVC with an objective of creating employment and reducing poverty through the establishment of new industries and commercial entities. An instance is zakat, known as compulsory almsgiving, and other welfare taxes to support this venture. And that will be all for this edition. Visit our website www.proshareng.com for more updates on Islamic finance. Follow us on our social media platform displaying on the screen. Many thanks to all our viewers for watching and following the Islamic Finance Weekly. Please stay safe and see you again next week.